Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about burnt toast. But before we talk about burnt toast, I do want to talk about the last week because we had not one, but two interviews right here on Wireframe live at the usual time, which is this time. We had Arko Sen, who actually implemented Mise en Mode at his company. Which we had a really great conversation. I was really digging that. Obviously, it's a really big topic for my heart, talking about that kind of stuff. And then we had Thomas Gerard, who is the founder of Unique Ways and also a speaker, has been on the TED stage. So sharing a lot of insight about how he shares ideas across to folks, which again is probably a lot different from the normal content I would have on here. But look, I'm just glad to have people here who want to be on the show. I think this is great. Speaking of that, this Wednesday will be another interview, tech permitting, which we'll get into in a minute, with Andy Hay, who I met several years ago at a meetup here in New York. And man, we just get cerebral when talking about design system stuff. So if you are a design system nerd, or really just a UX nerd in general, I'm confident you will not want to miss the conversation that we're going to have on Wednesday. If you want to have a conversation here on this show, please visit wireframe.ds.house. I'll eventually have a lower third to let you know that and where to go. But ultimately, there's a form over there. You could fill it out. I just had a submission come in last night for a couple of people who want to be a part of the show. As a caveat, just because of the way that this show is set up, and just again to show you, I have this unit that's over here. I can't have multiple people on the show because multiple people on the screen looks odd. So I want to make sure that it's always one person on the screen. Then I could also, of course, focus on there. And I think it just ends up being a more controlled conversation. It's not people talking over each other. And I really just want to have that one-on-one time. So I hope you can, align with that. But it's something that came up in the submission, which was like potentially a pair of people. And I was like, let's do one at a time. And I'm happy to have individuals on at different times. That's totally good for me. But speaking of some tech stuff, so a couple of things. I had to actually update a little bit of the tech recently to start doing the interviews. So one of the things that I added was a way to switch into the view that's over here. And in order to do that, I moved some things around. And now, as you could see, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty where there's no picture on this anymore. And the reason there's no picture on that right now is because I want to try to get this screen in here because I have some things to show you. But while that screen's coming in here, this doesn't work. It's just very odd. So I need to get that squared away. I'm sure that things will work by Wednesday in terms of having Andy's face on here like we did last week. Because I know how to get back to that state. But ultimately, I need to get a better working condition here. Speaking of working conditions, this camera right here, this one, okay, is still a freaking problem. As I was setting up here today, I took a look at my monitor, and all of a sudden it had the menu on it for like, hey, do you want to change something? I'm like, I didn't touch anything about this camera. Like the remote control, which is here, didn't touch. And suddenly it's like, oh, do you want to change some settings? So you might see some settings on here. And even like when I started the show today, the camera didn't want to turn on. I had to like basically do a reboot of it effectively, which is just super annoying. All that being said, guess what? It's Cyber Monday today. So if you haven't purchased your tech stuff yet today, this is the day to do it. And in fact, I had some stuff that was sitting in my cart for B&H that when I was about to go ahead and hit, the checkout button, I found out that there was something was removed from it because it was immediately sold out. But luckily, that thing was on Amazon, so I purchased it on Amazon. In fact, most of the stuff that I got or had my B&H card, I actually ended up going and purchasing on Amazon because it ends up being easier to purchase from there. But I did have to purchase one thing, actually three, at Amazon, not at Amazon, at B&H instead because they had a good deal. It was a very significant amount of money off for the purchasing. So what did I get? I got new equipment, people. We're upgrading out here. Okay, so instead of these three random cameras that I have on here, which are all different kinds of I guess, color grading and image quality, et cetera, right? We got this thing over here, right, which is my Osbot Tail Air, okay, which I love this camera, I actually really do, but it's a digital camera, right? So if I zoom in over there, you're going to get artifacts and stuff like that. And then you have this piece of shit, which is I think a near stream or net stream or something like that. This is a piece of shit garbage camera. I wish if it didn't have the menu show up in the image, and it was a lot better in terms of staying on. I think it would be an okay camera because it can do HDMI and USB out at a reasonable price. But it's a piece of shit camera, so I'm not using it anymore. And then the third camera, which is the one that is this one over here. This is an old camera that I had for a really long time. That is a regular like DSLR kind of camera, but it's an old like Panasonic something or other that I'm just doing HDMI out of, and it's technically, it's old. It's several years old, but it still does the job, obviously. But the reality of it is that I want to have consistency. This is, design systems. I want consistency, right? So I'm getting all three of the same camera. And that's the thing that I got from B&H. I got all three of the same camera from B&H, and they are Osbot Tail 2s. That's what I'm getting. And then I'm getting a new switcher. So this thing over here, which is my SR20 HD from Roland, getting a new switcher. When I got the switcher a while ago, I thought, hey, this is going to be great because it does the streaming. It has, a couple of inputs. It has lots of different audio options. It's got the physical buttons and stuff. I loved all of that. It has the screen that's here so I can monitor stuff. I love all of that stuff, okay? What I've realized now, especially for this show, is I've outgrown it. It actually doesn't do all the things that I really need it to do, like lower thirds. I mentioned earlier, lower thirds are really hard on this. I have to make a lot of different modifications just to get a lower third on here, and that's annoying. It's annoying. I've screwed up, getting the lower third on here on the live show several times, and I'm just like, I don't want to have to think, especially when I'm running a show, about what to set up in here. So, that's a big part of it. Inputs. I only have 2 HDMI inputs in this thing, right? When you have like things that are ATM minis and other devices out there that have been around for a while now, have at least 4, right? The device that I'm getting, which is going to be a YoloBox Extreme, it's actually a pretty new machine, has 8 inputs and actually 2 HDMI outputs, which is actually going to be really helpful here. So if you're an AV nerd, what I plan to do is I plan to have the computer here, which actually has 4 HDMI outs, or 4 digital video outs, I should say. I'm going to send 2 of those outs effectively as separate monitors into this device. And then they are going to go out. Those outs are going to go one here. I'll make the large one here. I'm going to have one out here and one out here. So now I'll be able to really control what goes on these screens a lot better because I'll have those inputs separately sending out here as correct signals. So that's the plan there. And then I'll be able to monitor from the device itself. I could actually see the whole monitoring, and it is touchscreen, but I'm also getting the YOLO deck, which makes it physical buttons, which I love my physical buttons. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So I'll have that's set up. The only thing that I don't like about the YOLO box is that it doesn't have XLR input. So this guy, as an example, I need to um, put in differently. I think I have a device that'll help there. I do have a Rodecaster, an old Rodecaster, which is larger than this thing, which I don't want on the desk. I'd much rather something smaller on the desk. Um, but I do have a Rodecaster, which I know works with the device. I've gotten several confirmations it does. But I have a smaller thing that has XLR inputs that I plan to put together in there. And that's what the plan will be. Plus, I'm getting new tripods that are coming in for each one of those cameras because right now, again, these things are on like separate weird device things here. There's a secondary switcher that's handling when I do this and this, right? So when I go back and forth, look, mom, no hands, right? That's actually a foot pedal that I'm doing to switch these things out. Which I will miss, admittedly. The foot pedal has actually been really nice because I could talk to the person and switch back and forth, and you wouldn't notice that. So that part is actually gonna unfortunately go away. That's the one thing I'm actually kind of gonna miss in the whole thing. But ultimately, there's going to be some quality upgrades for sure. Overall, probably keeping this mic because it's so much easier than the lav to turn on and off. But that's the plan. That's what's going to be going on and cleaning up a whole bunch of stuff that you're not seeing right now. I'm looking at it now going, man, I can't wait. But I'm also, while, this is Amazon and B&H and things like that, you would expect these things to be coming in soon. And technically, I could have got the things tomorrow. But I'm getting that nice 8% cashback kind of situation from having it pushed out to next week. I think it's coming in, all these things. So we should see a big bump in quality in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, not for Andy's show, but for shows certainly in the next year, which will be queuing up. And again, like I said, if you want to be on the show, send me that message. All right? Anyway, let's get into the topic. I'm also looking at chat, just in case you're watching live, which doesn't seem like anyone is. But if you want to watch live, I'm looking in the chat now, and I'll address some things. So what are we talking about again today? We're talking about burnt toast. So what the heck is that? Right? It's a play on words. Effectively, what's happened recently is that there's been a lot of conversation about GitHub recommending to no longer use toasts as a UI element. Okay, what does all this mean? Well, normally this is the part of the show where I go ahead and I'd ask AI, hey, what's a toast? But I'm obviously not going to do that today because there's no signal. It's just flying around. So I'm going to explain to you what a toast is. Effectively, what a toast ends up being is this UI element that's meant to alert the user outside of the context of the page that they're working in typically, right? So you'll have some page and you make a change, and that change is like, working in the background. Sorry, I'm getting very excited. Working in the background of the page, and you go off to do something else, and then there's some box that pops up from maybe the bottom or some top or whatever, and it has a message that says, hey, the process that you had done a few minutes ago is now complete, or it failed, or whatever. That thing ends up being a toast. That's usually what we call it. Some people call it a snack bar. There's other names for the thing. You can go to component.gallery to potentially find some other names for it. But ultimately, it's this little message that pops up and says some information. All right? And I do want to go to the computer to show you some stuff because first going to start with GitHub where they actually talk about it, where GitHub no longer uses toasts because of their accessibility and usability issues. And it says again in this thing here, toasts pose a significant accessibility concerns and not recommended for use. And again, it says there are accessibility and usability issues. And the thing is here, this is giving you a lot of alternatives, right? What to use instead of toasts, right? It has this whole list of stuff. Now here's the considerations, okay? This is the thing that I'm actually really interested in because these are the aspects of Toast UI that potentially represent large barriers for users. First, this is all stuff from the WCAG. 2.2.1 timing adjustable, right? So if the user should be able to adjust the timing of a UI element as it appears, and toasts typically don't do that. Toasts usually appear for a little while, then they disappear, right? And it's an arbitrary amount of time that they appear or disappear, because sometimes it takes a while for a person to find the toast, address the toast, et cetera, et cetera. It might be gone by the time all that happens. Meaningful sequence. This is how it is placed inside of the DOM, right? And because toasts are a thing that fly out on top of all the other pieces of the DOM, it's entirely possible that that thing is out of sequence in the larger page, right? So it's totally possible. Keyboard navigation parts here. And this is talking about how if there's interactive controls inside of the toast, they need to have keyboard operations, also including a mechanism to delete the toast or dismiss it, as well as managing focus when it is removed from the DOM, right? So think about that, right? Let's go back to over here. I mean, focus management is huge when it comes to accessibility, and it's a very hard thing to do, especially when it comes to taking some element that the user is currently focused on, they're currently working on something, and then have it automatically move to something else without them doing anything. That's one of the things that I personally would hate the most, right? When your focus jumps from one element to another and you didn't do anything, right? You were just working on this one thing and suddenly you're here, right? That sucks. Conversely, if you're in the toast and you're trying to read the toast or decide or what you're going to do, and then all of a sudden it disappears, where's the focus go? It goes somewhere else. Where does it go? Who knows? I don't know. Where's it supposed to go? Right? It's a really good call out here about trying to manage focus. And this isn't necessarily something about interactivity, right? Even focusing just to read what's going on inside of there, and then go back to the element that you were working on. I think that's going to be really hard. Status messages. I think this thing is probably a little bit of a negligible thing, because we do have ARIA roles, like ARIA role status, that are meant to politely introduce information. Certainly you don't want a lot of it, but I think this is actually okay. Resize text. I mean, as long as the text is the size of everything else in the page, I'm not really worried about it. Horizontal reflow. Yeah, you should have a better thing. This is just an implementation problem. Focus order. We talked about focusing, right? Focusing is a big deal. I don't know what the focus order is supposed to be for a toast. Consistent identification. Okay, yeah. So this is another thing that I have some experience in. So there's several different kinds of notifications that can appear in your UI. One of those things, well, let me explain, I guess, the levels of this, because you could have a status message that appears in the context of the place where you're working on right now. Right, so imagine you're filling out a form and you forgot to fill out a field, and you get that little message that says, "Hey, you forgot to fill out this field," is like a exclamation point, right? So that's like an inline notification, right, to let the user know. Then you can have a page level notification. That's usually like a banner, right? A banner that says, "Hey, you need to finish this one step before you move forward," or whatever, and maybe you can navigate to that step or whatever it is, right? But the in-page navigation, notification, is usually that banner or alert that is inside of the page, that is just trying to explain to you about something on the page overall, in this application, this current area that you're in. And then there's a site-wide notification, right, where maybe you need to update your credit card information in your profile, but you're not currently on the profile page, you're currently on your dashboard. But it's important for the system to continue for you to put in your credit card information, so we need to be able to show that site-wide. It has to be shown everywhere. Now, the thing that I believe in all of this stuff is certainly there should be a design system that is dictating the visual treatment of all three of these things, right? Because those things should be consistent. It's similar to what they're talking about here, consistent identification, right? The way that you show inline notifications should be the same. The way that you show in-page notifications should be the same, right, with the alerts, and then the way that you show site-wide notifications should also be the same, right? So there should be certainly a visual design system, kind of treatment for each one of those three things, and in some cases, depending on the way that you handle that stuff, you can have very similar visual treatments for all those things, right? Because for your inline, you just use the background of the thing that it's sitting on, right? Because that's what inline is. For a alert in page, you would have more of a container that says, "Hey, this is part of the page," and maybe there's a little bit more of a visual treatment there. But ultimately, you'll have the same kind of icon with the exclamation point and the messaging, and maybe it's even the same kind of color to show it's a notification. And then for your site-wide, that's usually when you have it overlay on top of the page, right? So you have some kind of like flyout that appears from one of the sides. That's what a toast is, right? It flies up from the bottom or the side. And again, similar kind of treatment to the last one, the in-page nav, is just on top of the page, right? Showing you that it's over everything else. It's site-wide. But you can have consistent treatments. What happens sometimes in some places is that because the site-wide navigation is a component, what I've seen teams do is that they'll use that component in their own applications in their own way. And the problem that comes around with that is because there's implementations that are happening where one team needs to show that there's a site-wide navigation that's important. Sometimes they conflict, where you'll have one site-wide navigation that's coming in for one person's product, which happens to also be on this other page, which they already have their own site-wide notification system. So they conflict. So I believe that when it comes to notifying a user about something, it is meant to be separated by responsibility. Meaning, if it is an inline notification, right, then the owner of the component that needs to show the notification, they're in charge of putting the right design system component in there and showing it, right? If it's a page level notification, then the owner of the page needs to be responsible for how that page gets, has notification goes in that page. If it's for the site, then the person who's responsible for the site needs to be responsible for notifications, not the people who are in charge of individual pages. So if you have a need for site-wide notifications, you need a site-wide notification service. That's what you need, okay? No individual feature is supposed to be responsible for that. You're supposed to have some front-end architecture set up where all the apps sit on top of that provides that site-wide notification structure. If you have a shared navigational pattern, right, shared primary navigational pattern that has your company's logo and the primary navigation items, maybe your profile settings, all that kind of stuff, and you have that kind of Chrome that's sitting for all the apps to put inside, that's where you should also put in your site-wide notification system, right? And could that just be the bell icon that shows stuff? Could be. Is it the thing that just has the toasts pop up in it? Also could be, right? But that's where that belongs. It's wherever who owns the elements that every page uses, right? The site-wide stuff, that's where that goes. So just a word of caution when you're talking about composing these things, okay? And then we have usability considerations down here. Let's keep going. Go down here. Large displays, right? Meaning that it's harder to see because it could be out of view. Distractions, right? Whenever you put motion in something, it ends up being distracting, especially when they're working on something. Blocking UI, big deal, right? Having a toast block some stuff that you're working on. Anything that's floating around is susceptible to blocking UI. Love that. Screen magnification, again, could be out of the range of the user. Working memory is going to be a matter of trying to go back to the thing that they were just working on because they were working on something else. Banner blindness, if you use too many of them, it's like crying wolf and they'll ignore that stuff. So you want to use that sparingly. Disconnection, right? So this could be something that isn't related to the stuff that they're working on, so you're going to be confused by it. And then accidental dismissal. Another great thing is the escape key. So lots of really good information about the reasons why they did this. It's not just, oh, we were bored and we wanted to get rid of toast because we don't want to maintain this component. No, it's very clear, right? There's lots of considerations here that are very valid that you know are trying to be addressed by other patterns, right? It's not like they're saying, oh, don't use this, we're not going to give you any alternatives. They give you alternatives above about banners and other things, right? Now, this sparked a lot of controversy online because for a large company like GitHub and higher even than that, Microsoft, to come out and say, yes, we acknowledge that the component exists, do not use it, is big, right? Because for many people just make components because somebody else has made a component. Ah, yes, of course, because Spectrum has toasts, we need toasts, right? Or Shopify has toasts, we need toasts, right? Of course we need toasts, right? So for a company to go out and say that, yes, there's toast, but do not use them, it's huge, right? I mean, admittedly, this is exactly the same thing that I've been saying for a while. It's what I kind of mentioned at my talk a month ago, is that there are other patterns out there that you could be using. You do not need to use a modal. There's other alternatives. You just need to think. And that's what this page is talking about, right? It's saying, hey, we understand this component exists, but there's better things out there. And here are the better things, and here's the reason that's not good, right? I love this page as a understanding of what I've been trying to preach, right? But people don't like it because they have toasts in their experiences, right? They're like, oh, I don't see the problem because they didn't read the page, right? That's exactly what this is. They're doing this knee-jerk reaction of, oh, they can't get rid of toast. I use a toast, but and they're not reading the page, okay? They're not creative, ultimately. And one of those responses was this Medium article, which is over here. This is by Attila Vago, and why GitHub's war on toast is bad for bad news for accessibility. Let's go to the post over here. So I saw this post a few days after the the announcement, and I meant to read this because I was very interested to know what the accessibility community felt like when it came to this stuff, right? Because I mean the reason why GitHub is removing is primarily a accessibility problem. So how is the accessibility community responding to this? So this is supposed to be a response, and you can kind of see what this whole thing is trying to say. It's a cop out, plain and simple, both bizarre and shocking from a tech giant that should know better. It's a very interesting take here. So there is a lot here, and explaining what the toasts are, and there's some history that's gone behind trying to there's going to get some history that we're going to eventually get back to, but it's telling a little bit about what stuff that they're recommending. But ultimately it says GitHub recommends using other more established, effective, and accessibility ways of communicating with users, and it makes no sense whatsoever. No, it makes plenty of sense. They've explained it very well, and it's effectively a ban or a war on toasts. I think it's a little aggressive, but continuing here. This is talking about how GitHub, and by larger Microsoft, has money and is a paying member of the W3C to try to include web standards into the web, like a thing like Toast. So adding, semantic elements like these, And yeah, it's talking about React or not React Aria, sorry, Aria, HTML Aria. The first rule of Aria is that don't use Aria, but in reality, there's things that you need to use Aria for, this is accurate because some things don't map up one to one. Now here we go. Here we go. Right here. Here we go. This is the thing that I don't feel good about. I'm going to say verbatim what I've selected here. He says, but the web wasn't never meant to be the place for basic and boring. The web was never meant to be the place where we purge everything we can't figure out quickly. Okay. There's so many things that are wrong with this statement that I believe. I mean, the first thing that we'll say is the first sentence, right? The web is never meant to be the place for basic and boring. Sure, I don't necessarily want basic and boring, but what I really do want, first and foremost, is usable, right? The purpose of the toast is not meant to be basic or boring. And granted, what we're talking about, of course, is that, without toast, suddenly we're basic and boring. That's not the case, right? The whole thing about toast is it's just notifying a user. That's all the purpose of the toast is meant to portray, So we have other ways of notifying the user. GitHub has outlined plenty of them. But I wouldn't attribute something being less basic and less boring to adding a toast, right? That doesn't make something less basic. A new toast makes it more dynamic. It's just the messaging. That's all it is. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to that kind of sentence. And then the second thing here, the web was never meant to be the place where we purge everything we can't figure out quickly. We're still figuring things out. Quickly is a move facts and break things kind of mentality, right? And that's not what the W3C is all about, certainly. It's not what web standards are supposed to be about, certainly, right? In many cases, web standards have screwed things up because they move too fast. There's examples of that, like dialogue, that they had to, walk back. There's the HTML menu that they had to, effectively walk back. Lots of things that end up being deprecated. I just had a conversation with my wife this morning about box sizing, and I had to explain to her it's kind of like a bug in CSS, right? So if you don't do these things right, you don't think about the ramifications, then you're going to get into some trouble, right? So it's important to do these things right. You don't want to just run through these things quickly. People are trying to figure these things out. And we'll see in a little bit about toast in particular. But I don't like that sentence. Let's go keep moving here. This is talking about some work that Eric Bailey did over at GitHub about some user research. And this person is applauding the research, but condemns the non-collaborative nature of it. Yeah, well, this is GitHub. Like, GitHub can do whatever they want because it's GitHub. Like, no one else has to necessarily not use toasts. I don't know. Okay. Here's a beautiful quote here. Imagine if everyone would have just relied on Leonardo da Vinci's failure to fly without his flying machine and concluded all airplanes are bad, let's bad flying. Okay, hold on a second now. Okay. How do I even say a response to this? This is comparing apples and oranges, in my opinion. Basically, Leonardo da Vinci tries to do flying and it doesn't work out, right? What did we do? Did we just stop? No. We figured out flying. We definitely did. Okay. But when it comes to toasts, well, we've figured out toasts and realized that it's not good, right? That's what GitHub is saying. So now we're not going to use that pattern anymore. This is almost like if we um, figured out a trying to get a good analogy here. Like, this is like figuring out something that's very dangerous and doing the dangerous thing for a long time and realizing, oh, we probably shouldn't do this anymore, and falling back to something else, like asbestos, right? You put asbestos in your home for insulation, and that's the way to do it because it's cheap and effective, and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden we found, oh, we shouldn't put asbestos in our houses, right? And we walk that back and we find something different to do instead, right? That's what we're really talking about here. Toasts, we're not saying no to toasts because we don't like them, right? We're not saying it because we don't want people to be creative anymore. We're saying that toast is effectively dangerous as to some people, right? It's unhelpful to some people. And because of this, we wanted to make it inclusive. We want whatever the messaging is going to be to these people, we want that messaging to be available to all people. So we're going to improve the messaging. And in the way that we do that is not by having some people have toasts and some people not having toasts. It's by choosing a pattern that works for everyone. And toasts is not that. That's what I'll say about that. I think that wraps it up very nicely, actually. I'm going to tweet that later. Or on Blue Sky or wherever the heck it's supposed to go. Anyway, moving on. All right. Let's see what else here. Okay, this is basically the end of that. All right. So ultimately, Adrian Roselli, who is a very well-known accessibility advocate, actually happened upon this and had his own take, which is that it's misinformed clickbait, which I'm getting the same kind of feeling for myself, in terms of the response that I'm having for it. And he has his own post from a long time ago, which will go all the way back up here. That comment down there is his edit, including that initial post. But he has this post from 2019 called "Scraping Burnt Toast," and this post is talking about all of the progress that has been made through the standards committees to try to make toast a real component, right? And there's a lot to read in here, but ultimately what he's talking about is the history behind trying to make this part of the specification, how Microsoft and Google were included in all this stuff, and a couple of things that already could help, like alert and log as roles. In fact, I remember seeing in this post, let's see here. Yeah, in the updates here, Scott, I think it was, said, Scott O'Hara said that output might be a reasonable way of announcing stuff, potentially, because it's a native live region element. With a little bit of CSS and scripting, and we can actually get this. And this is, again, 6 years ago, a month after he wrote the post, right, that Scott O'Hara is talking about this. He even has his own accessible toast situation that has UX considerations for inclusive toast, right? And a lot of this stuff has gone on for a while, right? Years ago. And only until very recently was this post, which was on Medium, was introduced because of the announcement for GitHub. So what it seems to be is that the accessibility advocates recognize toast as existing, right? They're having conversations, trying to figure out if it is a thing that we can make inclusive ultimately. But as it stands right now, it's not, and that's why GitHub is putting it on a shelf, right? Again, it's acknowledging, hey, it exists up there, that's okay, but here's all the problems that we have with it, right? All of them listed right here. And here's all the alternatives, right? And I think we need more of this out there. We need more of people sitting down and looking at our patterns that we've developed over the past several years out of what we felt like necessity and innovation, and really scrutinizing and saying, is this the best way of us moving forward, right? I use modals as the example for this all the time, right? I believe modals can be wiped out of existence if we really just sat down and thought about new patterns for these things. And I think toast is another really good example. In fact, there's a possibility of just getting rid of things that exist on top of other things. I think maybe this is what we're coming down to, is that maybe we need to just review our need of putting stuff on top of other stuff in UI elements and trying to keep everything two-dimensional again, simplified again, right? I'm wondering if that's what we need to really pay attention to. But you know what? Let me know what you think, okay? About, do you want toast? Do you not want toast? I don't know. I mean, personally, like I said, I think there's an opportunity for us to not have toasts. But do you got toast in your system? What are you using toast for? Are there guidelines? Are people following those guidelines? Are people using those things as promotional sales ads? I bet you some people are. Unfortunately, they're not used for that, but I bet you it's happening. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please help out the show by smashing the like and subscribe button on your way out. If you have anything that you wanted to add to the conversation, go and visit us at the Discord, which, let's see if we can drop that on the lower third over here. There it is, boom, discord.ds.house. Come on over there and join and start a discussion about some things. Love to have you, of course. It would be more the merrier. And what else? There's other things that I wanted to say. If you want to be a guest on the show, of course, go to wireframe.ds.house and fill out the form. Love to talk to you live on the show and let people know what's up. And play nice in the comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.